I know in the podcast that you ask 4 very important questions. Why those 4 questions?
So when I constructed the podcast, it was always about me exploring the meaning of life for me, about understanding how people live life. And so it was originally 3 questions and it's morphed into 4. So you've got the passion, success, contribution, and meaning of life. And what I realized as life goes on, or as this process goes on, is that if more people could actually spend the time and answer those questions for themselves, they would lead a happier life. They would find that by answering those questions for each of us, it creates opportunity for a better world. So that's what I would like. That's what the podcast is about. I want people to start thinking about actually what they want, how they can get a better life, or how they can get meaning of their own. So I think the podcast has such an opportunity in that respect. But it's not about me in the podcast, really. It's about those questions. If those questions became a thing, I mean, what would it be like if we put that into schools, into children's education? If we got them to ask themselves early on, what are you passionate about now? Because passions can change. What is success? What's been successful for you today? What was success today? Can you honor those successes? What did you give people today in terms of contribution? If we did that from very early on in life, wouldn't we have an amazing workforce, amazing people in the world?
I think we would. And I remember seeing online a list of skills and attributes not measured in schools. And there were about 50 of them that were, I think, vitally important for human existence.
Yes.
And they were missing. And I think that just proves that as society, as human beings, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we have got a bit, haven't we?
Yeah, there's still a long way to go. Right.
But
Cool.
there has to be progress after all.
Oh yeah. Well, fingers crossed. Right, fingers crossed. Yeah.
But it does make you wonder. That's what I notice is what's missing in the world in terms of literature and film and story, is we don't actually have any stories of the ideal society. We've never written any books, and I've never seen Hollywood do a movie of Utopia.
Well, isn't that because when we get what we want, we suddenly realize that we don't want it anymore?
Well, I don't know. We seem to create movies around dystopian societies. We're quite happy to do that. And we're quite happy to create movies with guns, violence and explosions and the other. But no one seems to make a movie that features or shows a sustainable economy, a sustainable world. I mean, I'm sure there must be a story you can weave around that, but we don't explore those things. The only one that ever came close to it was Star Trek. The original Gene Roddenberry Star Trek had a society that didn't use money. And in that society, the whole process or the whole objective of your life was to live the best life you could, to live and to express your skills and talents. And that kind of thing was quietly pushed aside as a standard commercial model was followed. And, I don't have a problem with that. It's just that I think if we're going to move to a society which is more equal, more fair, and more sustainable, we need to start showing people that it's not all sackcloth and ashes. There is a possibility here, but they can't see that if there's no films being made about it.
That's true. It's also true that one man's pain is another man's pleasure sometimes. So we have to be careful. Look, my neighbor's idea of utopia is probably my idea of hell. And so so I would probably distance myself from that and recommend a documentary by Joel Gilbert called There's No Place Like Utopia, where he takes different examples of people who have tried to create the perfect society, or what they thought was the perfect society, and how it all fell apart miserably at the end of the day. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have progress. It just means that we still need to have space for individual differences within the greater picture of things, which I
I
think
think
we
that's
have.
true. You do that. I agree. That's true. We have to have space for individual differences, and there has to be a space for individuality and people to explore that. But we can't. But the society we've currently created is creating massive diversion in terms of diversion from the top to the bottom. And if that carries on, the ultimate aim of that one is that the top will become the ultimate elite, and the bottom will become a subclass if they're not already.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, and within that is the conundrum and the problem of history of how do we maintain some level of balance. I don't think personally that we can live without something at the top and without something at the bottom. My experience of life says that divergence of understanding is important for a complete picture or holistic picture of life. However, like everybody else on the planet, I don't want to see that divergence get even bigger than it already is. And so at the same time, I also don't want to impose any of my ideas on other people because of I'm shit scared that I might actually be wrong when I think I'm right. But then I don't want to do nothing because that's not a solution either. So, we're left with these complex problems, which, hopefully minds greater than mine come together. And
Well, what happens, of course, that because the people like you who are idealistic, who don't want to impose their ideas, what happens is the people who are narcissistic do impose their ideas, and so you end up with a disproportionate society again, where the narcissists will determine that this is fine to do this, and because it's all about me.
Oh, absolutely. And at the same time, I think deeply personally, I have to realize that there's a narcissist within me. I think
Well, there is, but it depends how much you let them out to play, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that I'm not in a position personally for me myself where I can actually judge whether or not I'm at the right place to do that. I think I probably need about another 20 years of experience in order to see that more fairly. And because
It'd be fascinating if you actually made politicians have to have some training around this sort of stuff. You can
well,
be a politician just by putting yourself on the line, can't you? But if they had to have training around personal development so that they recognize their own trigger points.
Oh yeah. That the simple little things, or even if that was in schools, like the ability to remain calm within debate when points of friction or pain points appear is a highly underrated skill, because society is very easily triggered, as we know.
I get triggered. And so I invariably, I often get triggered, and I will find myself writing something, and I always write something, and I look at it and go, before I send that, am I triggered? Yes.
Yeah.
And I will often delete a post and then rewrite it again, having had a breath. Particularly when I'm playing my troll game.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then there's that you want. I think we want our responses to be honest. I think we want our responses to be open, and that triggered response is actually an honest response at that moment in time.
Yeah,
But
but triggered is fine as long as there's no insult in there. And sometimes,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's us being honest, but it's us being honest with our own honesty, realizing that that's not a good thing at this
yeah,
at this moment in time, which we can only get through reflection, which is hard when you want to live in the moment, because if you can't live in the moment, you can't enjoy stuff, because you end up in the paralysis of analysis if you sort of start studying everything that the possible reactions of everything that we could do are endless. So and yet we still have to act with care and consideration and kindness, and these are all the great human problems.
and